President Trump, with this mandate and with these wins and gains, we are on the precipice of something very big.
With him, the Republican Party has become deprogrammed, I think, from ideological obsessions. And the Democrats have become more ideological. Their motivation is, how do I advance my ideological crusade? It's not getting up in the morning and asking, how do I help my constituents? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. What a packed show we've got today. We've got an amazing range of guests, and there's something that unites them all. A very, very great and positive word: winning. People who have won in various ways, won elections here in California as part of what I've been calling the red wave in California, where you've just seen really remarkable shifts from Democrat to Republican here in my home state, but also winning the very important lawsuits, legal battles against Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta, the state attorney general, especially on a very, very big issue, voter ID, where there's a fascinating battle going on between the state government, Newsom and Rob Bonta, and the city of Huntington Beach. We've got the guy who's leading the fight against Gavin Newsom on voter ID here with us today to explain where that stands. We got some fantastic candidates who've won their races, but I do want to start with the latest on President Trump's emerging administration. Since we last met each other on this show, more picks have been announced. They're coming out thick and fast. The one I want to focus on, and a potential one I want to focus on, is in this category of health, because one of the most interesting developments in the election campaign was the emergence of what became known as MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. And to me, it was so fascinating that this issue of the health of our nation and of our people has just became so central. And President Trump really took this on board, because it's something actually I've been working on for years. Back in the day when I worked in politics in the UK, what we would call public health was a big part of my work. There, it's a different priority because, of course, in the UK, you have the National Health Service. It's government run and taxpayer financed healthcare 100%. And so there's a real incentive, or should be an incentive, for the government to try and prevent people getting sick in the first place, because that reduces the costs on the National Health Service. I thought, to me, that was a very obvious point, but it was a real struggle for me to actually get that taken seriously. And not just me, those of us who worked on that issue, including the health secretary in the UK that I worked with, who prioritized that question. And it's a really big issue, but as I found in the UK, and we certainly see here in America, you've got huge structural and institutional barriers against people living healthy lives. You've got all sorts of environmental factors in the broader sense, in terms of, how the food system works and agriculture and all these issues that actually, even when people want to try and eat healthily and live healthily and do things that they know they should do, just circumstances make it very hard, especially if you're poor and you don't have the means to try and follow the advice that we all are pretty much aware of. And so that whole question of healthy living and the impact that can have both on individual lives and extending their lives. We have one of the, we've had declining life expectancy in America, and we, as has been pointed out many times on the campaign, as this issue became more and more central. We are one of the most unhealthy rich countries in the world. We're the richest country in the world, but one of the most unhealthy. And so this is a huge issue. And now, of course, why did it become such a big issue? Because of the unexpected alliance that emerged during the campaign between Donald Trump and RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy, who's been campaigning on this stuff for years. And in fact, the person that really brought all that together was someone that you may know well if you've been a regular viewer of this show and my Fox News show, and also the parallel podcast to this, the Big Ideas Book Club, a guy called Cali Means, who's now really emerged as the driving force. He and his sister, Casey Means, recently published a book called Good Energy that really looked at the detail of how the way we live and the things that we eat and all these things affect our health in a holistic way, our metabolic health, as they call it, and that we need to make major changes to try and change the circumstances so that people can live longer, healthier, happier lives. And the key targets of the reform effort that Callie Means and Casey Means has been arguing for, and RFK Jr., has been this interplay between the food system and the medical industry, in particular big pharma. And the argument that they put forward is that we've got this food system that we subsidize with taxpayer money to produce food that's incredibly bad for our health, that makes us sick. And then we have the pharma companies that get rich by treating the sickness. Wouldn't it make more sense if we just stopped people getting sick in the first place? And then you don't need big pharma to come in and make profits off the back of sickness. That's their basic argument. I'm oversimplifying it, of course. But what's so fascinating is that Bobby Kennedy is now, thanks to Donald Trump, and there's speculation about what might happen. And you even had Howard Lutnick, who was the co-chair of the transition team. He was on CNN a couple of weeks before the election, and he was asked specifically about RFK Jr. and what role he would play. And he said, he'll be an advisor and so on, but, he's not going to be the secretary or anything like that. Well, never assume that you know what is in Donald Trump's mind, because that's exactly what happened. RFK Jr. has been announced by Donald Trump as his pick for HHS secretary, presiding over all of this health infrastructure. It is an absolute bombshell in terms of the current establishment. Of course, he's controversial in terms of his positions on vaccines, but his arguments on this other area of his responsibility, health and wellness and so on, they're not. That's not a partisan issue. And in fact, you could even say in many ways it's more of a left-wing issue, and it just shows what an interesting non-ideological coalition Donald Trump has put together. But there's another aspect I want to highlight, and I'll close with this. But I'm so happy to see that, I mean, as of the time of taping this, it's Tuesday afternoon, November the 19th. I mean, these announcements are coming out, as I said, very, very frequently. So um, uh, by the time you listen to this, maybe an announcement has been made, but at the moment, hasn't been confirmed yet. But the leading candidate to become director to run the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, is a fantastic, fantastic person, a good friend of mine, Jay Bhattacharya, Professor Jay Bhattacharya. You've seen him on this show. You've seen him on my Fox News show. You've seen him all over the place. He became very well known, of course, during the pandemic. He's at Stanford University, close to where I am. And I was the first person to put Jay on television, actually, during the pandemic. You may recall, I was the first person really to argue against the lockdowns on TV. Really early on, March 2020, when I could see that this was totally counterproductive. And I met Jay through mutual friends here in the Bay Area, and he was unbelievably brave because he set out with a couple of colleagues from Stanford to prove that everything that they were saying about the COVID virus was wrong and not based in science, and that the lockdowns therefore were not justified. The essence of his argument was, and he proved it with data. Do you remember how we were all told to follow the data? Well, he had the data early on. This is not wise after the event. This is not years later. This is in March 2020, right at the beginning. And he proved that the virus, the COVID virus, was way more infectious than anything we've ever seen before, but also much less deadly than was being argued in the media and by the medical establishment. In other words, the logic of that was, it makes no sense to try and stop transmission because this thing is incredibly transmissible. It goes through the air in aerosols, not droplets, and so on. So social distancing is a waste of time because there's not about 6 feet and droplets falling to the ground. These things the virus can travel through the air 30, 40 feet and so on. It's no good trying to prevent transmission. What you really need to do is prevent people who are most at risk from dying and getting seriously ill. And that's what led to the strategy that he and others argued called focused protection. And it ended up being the Great Barrington Declaration. Many of you would have seen that. But the reason I go over all this is that during that whole period, when Jay Bhattacharya was almost alone in the medical establishment, a few other colleagues here at Stanford, Martin Koldorf, John Ioannidis, etc., a few others, were telling the truth about COVID. He was being absolutely vilified, dismissed as a fringe epidemiologist, even though he's a professor at Stanford. Stanford University behaved absolutely disgracefully. They suspended him just for telling the truth, investigated him. It all was bogus. It never went anywhere. I mean, the way he was treated was an absolute disgrace. He was hounded by the medical establishment, all of it. And so to me, there is something so wonderful about the fact that President Trump, if the reports are correct, are going to put him in charge of the very institution and the people that smeared him falsely and accused him of these terrible things. He's now going to be in charge. To me, that is such a beautiful turn of events. And I think it's a magnificent idea to appoint Jay. He's going to do a fantastic job if he is head of the NIH, a complete reversal of the appalling Fauci years, which led, of course, to the complete collapse of public faith in our medical establishment, in all this stuff that they put out and the arguments that they made. Trust in the medical establishment, in public health, and all of this totally collapsed because of their lies and smears and cover-ups. And now you're going to have someone who told the truth from day one in charge of it. It is absolutely fantastic. All right, Jen Horn, great to see you again. This is, we normally say California Corner. We've got some great California stories, including the latest on the Sanctuary City madness that you're going to update us on. But I do just want to check in with you on what's going on with our national politics. It's just kind of announcements the whole time, this incredible energy that's coming from Mar-a-Lago. What are your thoughts? You know, we're now, was it 2 weeks exactly? We're taping this Tuesday. Yes, it's 2 weeks exactly since the election.
I am still smiling from ear to ear, Steve, because not only did Trump win, but he won in such a big way. The swing states, the popular vote, all of the things that he has switched, the margins he's closed, even in blue states like ours. And I think it's great because more and more, I think Trump supporters are turning into the majority. I think Elon Musk deserves a lot of credit for helping normalize Trump supporters. And I think so many of us feel free, not that we haven't, but feel free to say, yes, I support Donald Trump. I mean, we're seeing football players and UFC fighters doing the Donald Trump fist dance, whatever we're calling that. So I think it's kind of great. But as far as what we've seen so far, I think President Trump is not messing around. I think he is acutely aware that he has 2 years before to really implement so much of his agenda. And if he performs for the American people, this really does set up the Republican Party, I think, for the next 10 years of election wins. But the pressure is still there. If it doesn't work out for the American people, then we have to explain that. And that's going to be 10 bad years, maybe. So I think he knows there's a lot on the line. And I think he's ready to get to work. And as much as I have post-traumatic stress from his loss in 2020, it almost feels like this might be the best case scenario because he's not coming in under the darkness of COVID. He's coming in where people have seen what the other side had to offer. It's not much. He's ready to get to work. And these appointments, I'm loving them. I know they're shocking a lot of people, but I think his appointments are showing that he is not looking for someone to tiptoe through the daisies. He's looking for someone to come in there and disrupt and drain the swamp. And I think by these appointments, you're already seeing people, in many cases, I guess a nice word would be self-deporting out of the Department of Justice, out of the Department of Defense. You've got the swamp actually leaving before you actually have to go in there and fire people. So I've been very happy with his selection so far. And I think if you really think through what he's looking for, even his more controversial choices really make sense.
Yeah. And I think that the kind of seriousness of purpose, I think, is very much there. The fact that it's coming. So, I mean, I was reading somewhere that last time in 2016, the first appointment wasn't announced till December. And now we've had most of them, you know, like it's really a whole different story. And as you say, he's not messing around. And I just think that what will be really interesting, exactly as you say, is now you got the drama and the energy from the appointments. You're going to see all over again after Inauguration Day. And it feels to me like if this is a guide, you know, how they've obviously really prepared for this and the team is there and they got all their choices ready to go and, you know, whatever. You're going to see the same kind of thing in the first hours and days after the inauguration.
Yeah, I think everybody is ready to go. I mean, President Trump himself has said when he won in 2016, he was excited and he won, but he didn't really know how to govern. And he had people around him who were talking about the traditional ways of doing things and kind of swamp centric ways. And they were giving him really bad advice. And I think what President Trump knows is he's not running for reelection and he has a short amount of time before the midterm elections to really get things done. And he's got the wind at his back with a huge mandate and the House of Representatives in the hands of Republicans, the Senate in the hands of Republicans. So he has a chance to really make a difference. And I think, really, when it comes to the economy, I think what you're going to see him tackle first is renewing the Trump tax cuts. I think he's going to do no tax on tips. I think he's going to deliver those promises relatively quickly. And of course, on day one, he's going to start securing the border. And I've been laughing at all of the hysteria. I mean, it's really quite silly, the hysteria around this term mass deportation. What I think President Trump is looking for, and Speaker Mike Johnson actually underscored it on the Sunday shows. He was on with Jake Tapper on CNN. And he said that it's not about taking big butterfly nets, right? It's not about going after everyone. This is about prioritizing the criminals that the Biden administration has let into this country and sending them back to their country of origin. It's about securing the border right now so that we can avoid any more of this infiltration with people who are here for nefarious purposes. And I think you see a lot of fear mongering on the part of MSNBC and CNN and all the major corporate kind of legacy media outlets where they are spinning out of control because they don't know exactly what to do when they're
Yes,
covering this. And so their first reaction, I was listening to MSNBC this week, is to just fearmonger. And it's no wonder that these people are going crazy, cutting their hair off and going on sex strikes in their relationships because literally MSNBC is scaring the heck out of people. It's
I know.
ridiculous.
But
Mm,
it's really interesting watching. I agree. Funnily enough, I did an event last night in Orange County, um, and I've been doing loads of events the last year or so around the state of California, and it was the first time I was asked this question, which was someone asked me, "What media do I consume?" It's a really interesting question. So I just went through it, and I make a habit of seeing all sides. So I explained that we have the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal delivered. I'm old fashioned. I like the newspaper.
yeah.
Um, Even as I'm making breakfast for my boys in the morning, I'm pottering around doing all that. I have NPR on. I'm sorry, I don't have AM 870 the morning answer. Everyone should do that. But I have a little bit of NPR just to hear that, which is really extreme. I mean, if I think most people watching this probably don't listen to it. It's unbelievable. What's hilarious about NPR is that I genuinely think they believe they're being impartial. They have no idea how completely kind of totally, the groupthink and the propaganda has sort of, seeped into every pore. But then I do watch the other cable channels as well. Obviously, I'm on Fox and I watch a lot of Fox, but I do see MSNBC and the thing and CNN. And the thing that's so striking to me about MSNBC, and it hasn't, it's so sort of dreary and depressed. They're so negative. No one smiles. No one ever laughs. No one's having any fun. But it's been like that for ages. Even before the election, when it was all supposed to be joy, they were like that. They're just miserable. You know what I mean? Just in their presentation. It's really
I
interesting.
think they do look for the sadness. And I've actually been asked that question about media sources that I use. And my answer is what your answer is. And that is you have to be a really thorough consumer, you have to listen to everything. In the mornings, before I even go to start my morning show, I've listened to local news, I've listened to MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and I've gone through and listened to my colleague on Salem Radio, Hugh Hewitt. I've listened to, several different shows. So I'm getting some conservative, but I'm also getting the local news, getting all the cable networks. You have to really do that. But I do think that there's a crack that's emerging. First, we heard that Mika and Joe from Morning
Oh,
Joe,
that's
went
amazing,
to
isn't it? Yes.
Mar-a-Lago. And this is why I voted for President Trump, because he actually let them in the door. This guy has been called every name in the book by Morning Joe, and he still lets them in and apparently had a very pleasant conversation with them. But you also have a crack in some of the mainstream news media outlets that are seeing their ratings go down. You've seen people now start to go to podcasts like this one to start to get their news. That was a huge shift during this election cycle, and it happened quickly. And then you've also had this big thing in California, and the Washington Post, of course, included. But for us in California, the Los Angeles Times getting rid of their editorial board, choosing not to actually endorse a presidential candidate. I think, Steve, they finally see maybe just a little bit of the writing on the wall that they're going to have to do a better job. You can't just feed people information that is not true, that's not correct, or that's just laden with opinion. And so I'm kind of hopeful. And I actually think Elon Musk was the catalyst in this, that maybe
Right.
people are waking up a bit and they're realizing that they can't just trust with one source of the news media tells you, that you have to look other places. And I'm hopeful that maybe the journalists will actually hear this and start to do better. They really owe us that in this profession, to do better, to become
Yes.
sources of record for us once again.
It's very interesting you should mention that. I was just on, I don't normally do this, but, someone asked if I know back in the day from the UK to do a news podcast. They're very successful in the UK. I did it last week. And I don't know how we got into it. We're mainly talking about Trump and the election and all that kind of stuff. Somehow, I can't remember how, but we got into the whole, maybe it's to do with misinformation, covering things up or whatever, and COVID. Anyway, we got into the lab leak
Yeah.
thing. And I just said, actually, in a way that, pretty much now in here in America is pretty well established, actually, even the New York Times, like that it came from the lab and that our tax dollars funded it. And the development of that's pretty established. And I go further, and I've made this argument. I was the first on TV to make this argument. I put it all out, all the evidence that it was actually not just that Fauci's institute funded the research in Wuhan, but he commissioned it, right? That it was actually a proactive thing, because Anthony Fauci, had long been the leading world advocate of, champion for gain of function research. And I have all the kind of quotes from him over the years, etc. Anyway, this is all, to me, pretty well established here in America. It was amazing on this UK thing. I just mentioned it, and it was just this total, like, you're not suggesting that COVID,
Oh, no.
whatever. I said, what do you mean? Of course I am. I mean, that's well established. I mean, what else? What other explanations? He said, well, you have no conspiracies there. I said, sorry, it's just like, so we got into this whole conversation about it, and it was just really interesting to me, the kind of total disbelief. Like, how could you possibly say something like that? I thought it's amazing the level of, cover up of basic
Yeah.
truth that there is in so much of mainstream media. It's amazing.
And even more than that, I mean, I would add on to say there is just no curiosity. I mean,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
so you'd think that the lab story, which people have clearly heard in the news media, is fake. So prove it. Set out and prove it. But nobody wants to investigate it because they're afraid that what
Yes.
people are saying is the truth. Because as you know, we've seen all of the journalists who have covered this story extensively that have proven it with emails and with communication
Yes, and it
between
keeps
these.
coming out more and more of it. Yes.
And it's like they've turned their head to it. So I think what's so disappointing for me as someone my major was in journalism, is that curiosity is almost dead. The only time they're curious is if they want to look into a sexual harassment story about a Republican candidate or something like that. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's the curiosity to deliver. And I think that you touched on it. And I think it's not
Well,
just
by the way,
prevalent
the sexual
here, but in
harassment
Europe
story
too.
about a candidate, as long as it's a Republican candidate.
As long as it's a Republican.
Yes,
Yeah,
not
don't get me started on the Democrats. They'll not talk about those.
To name sort of some, but theoretical example, the husband of a Democrat candidate in a
That's right.
high-profile election.
Kamala.
No, not interested in that at all. But the thing that I'm reminding now, this conversation was so extraordinary. And at the end of it, this person said, well, Dr. Fauci, of course, didn't, they do the fact check thing, well, Dr. Fauci, of course, denies. And it wasn't even that, that denies funding the sort of, the sharp end of my argument. It's like denies that there was ever gain of function research and things. That's a ridiculous. I mean, everyone.
Which is not true.
It's
And
not
I
true.
mean,
And so, well,
you
he
look,
said he's denied repeatedly. I said, yes, he lied under oath. That's been established.
and he got
it's
caught.
amazing. They got caught, and they just can't believe that they're heroes. It's very interesting to me. The
Just
power
on that
of the
note,
narrative. Yeah.
on that note, what makes me crazy about that statement is that the Obama administration, which I'm guessing that probably these media outlets really enjoyed. They enjoyed that time. The Obama administration is the one that directly ordered Fauci
Exactly
to knock
right.
off the gain of function
Exactly.
research because they knew he was getting weird with it. He was overdoing it.
And I said this. I said, and I've got, I really spent a lot of time on it. I mean, I know the dates. Literally, the research was commissioned in March. The moratorium was in March. Then in October, the dates in 2014, exactly as you say. Let's not waste any more time. It's just amazing how you've got this incredible, the power of the narrative, the establishment as when they, they're with their person, that they, I think a lot of it is Trump as well, because of course Trump is seen as the great antagonist of Fauci, and anything that Trump says is obviously wrong because he's, Hitler. So it's ridiculous.
Until he's not.
He's
That's
not.
what
People go
and
and
this
Mika
is what
can
I'm
go and hang
loving.
out with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It,
Biden is welcome back.
this is what I'm actually loving. Just to kind of get back to the last 2 weeks, what I'm loving is that I am seeing that there is more of a normalization of Trump and Trump supporters. And I think that's really good for our country. As someone who's been a Trump supporter since 2016, and as a female in Los Angeles, Trump supporting, I've been called every name in the book, as you can imagine, simply for my political perspective. So I think the more we can get culture involved, and I do give Elon Musk a lot of credit for this, because I think he, with that endorsement, is someone that the main
I totally
respected.
agree with that.
And then you get the podcasters involved. And very quickly this happens. You've got Joe Rogan and the Pauls and all the other podcasters that I'm not cool enough to know about yet. They all start to endorse Trump. And now football players are
Football
dancing like
players
Trump.
and soccer
Yeah,
play, and it's everywhere. And I'm seeing, I mean, this is really, yesterday I was on my flight down to Orange County, sorry, Palm Desert, and then Palm Springs. And then I went to Orange County. The flight was just coming in, waiting to board our flight, passengers coming off. 3 people I counted with MAGA hats,
amazing.
separate,
In California.
Yes, in San Francisco Airport, getting, on the flight where I don't know where it came from, but like deplaning in San Francisco Airport with MAGA hats, red ones,
Yeah.
really obvious ones. Amazing.
This is what Andrew Breitbart said needed to happen, right? We have to impact culture to make real change. And I really feel like we are on the precipice of something very big. I think that President Trump, with this mandate and with these wins and gains in different demographic groups, and even here in California, I think we have a really big opportunity right now to make some changes in California. I would love to say to make California more red, to make California purple. Gosh, I would love to see it. But I think if we stick to crime and public safety and the economy, these were messages clearly sent by voters. We are going to make some big gains if we really stick to it and keep up the aggressive push to bring in more people to the Republican tent, because Republicans alone will not save California. We need a coalition of others, and I think we have an opportunity to get them right now.
Well, that's why I think it's very, very powerful that Trump has been using this term. I mean, I've used it for a long time, and he used it a lot in this campaign. Common sense, right? We're the party of common sense, and of course you might dismiss that. Some people might dismiss that as well. That's just a sort of cliche. Everyone says that, but there's something to it. And I think the important point is that with him, the Republican Party has become deprogrammed, I think, from ideological obsessions.
Yes.
And the Democrats have become more ideological. So when you look at the Democrats, and this is a very sort of deep point, I think, especially here in California, and you think about the politicians we see, and what they, whether in Sacramento or the local level, the Democrats, you just know that when they get up in the morning, they're truly, their motivation is, how do I advance my ideological crusade? How do I advance my climate agenda or my equity agenda? It's very intellectual and ideological. It's not getting up in the morning and asking, how do I help my constituents?
Yeah.
What
can I fix?
What can I fix? How do I solve the pothole? How do I, help this small business that's struggling with all these bullshit regulations or whatever? That's not how they're thinking. And that's the opportunity for us to be those people. And funnily enough, on the show too, we got a lot of candidates who won as Republicans, a new generation. They're fantastic, the state legislature, people I've worked with and I supported, who all have that attitude. Very, very pragmatic, problem solving, non-ideological.
Yeah, because people don't care what I think about marriage or abortion or you think about those issues, Steve. What they care about is that they can send their kids out to play in the front yard, that their kids can go to a good school, that neighborhoods are safe, that they can walk into a grocery store and afford the eggs and not seeing someone steal a case of laundry detergent on the way out. These are the real issues that I know that so many conservatives, I think, have the right heart in trying to fix some of these ideological problems. I get it. But right now, our state is suffering so badly. We have to dig ourselves out from the problems that Democrats have caused. And I think and I think candidates who are now positioning themselves as problem solvers, and that's what Trump did. If they position themselves in that way, people are going to start giving them a chance, even if they have the dreaded R by their
I
names
agree
in
with that.
California.
And this cultural, that's why the cultural stuff is incredibly important. The
Yeah.
football play, the dance, I really take that seriously. It's a very big change. Um, I mean, a good example of what we've just been talking about, actually here in California, a negative example, but it illustrates the point very clearly, is the Democrats' reaction to Trump's victory, which is seemingly not to reflect on it at all, about what it says, but to dig in, to use, double down on the craziness, on the ideological extremism. And you've got a great example of that. I didn't hear it. I just heard when you mentioned to me that something we could talk about today, LA on immigration. I mean, what? It's just what?
Well, you win the day because you still have my favorite line. We don't want a Trump-proof California. We need to, Newsom-proof the rest of the
Yes,
nation,
exactly.
basically. So this one doesn't involve Gavin Newsom directly, but the city council in Los Angeles today, Tuesday, voted unanimously, 13-0, to make Los Angeles a sanctuary city. Now, Steve, I've lived here my whole life. I've been on the radio in Los Angeles for 10 years. I would have sworn to you, I would have given you everything I have. I would have told you that LA was already a
Yes.
sanctuary. But yeah,
Yes.
how could we not be? I mean, I would have sworn to it. And I
Yes.
looked it up apparently back in I think it was 2016, perhaps. Eric Garcetti, the mayor at the time, came out and offered protections to illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. But you saw the writing on the wall with this. Karen Bass came out after Trump's victory and said, "We are not cooperating with mass deportations. We're not cooperating with President Trump on any of his immigration policies." Then, in what was a huge disappointment to me, and Jim McDonnell used to be a Republican. He was the sheriff of LA County. I supported Jim McDonnell for a long time before Alex Villanueva came in and beat him and took over at the LA County Sheriff's Department and actually did a stellar job. But Jim McDonnell was up for police chief for the LAPD. And when I saw his name, I thought, and I talked to people that you and I know and trust within law enforcement and the DA's office, they said, this is really the guy of the three people that were up for this position. So when Karen Bass picked him, I thought, this is great. Actually a good, strong police chief. We need this in Los Angeles. Maybe they're reading the writing on the wall. Maybe they're listening to voters. Well, Jim McDonnell gets in there, and at his confirmation hearing last week in front of the city council, he's got 100 people protesting about immigration and all of this nonsense. And so as he's giving his testimony, he says, "I'm not going to cooperate with any immigration laws." Now, this is hard for me because I don't want you to round up people who are here and running a gardening business. But what I can't take is how someone who is the head of the LAPD, a huge police force, can sit there and give sworn testimony that he is not going to turn over criminal illegal immigrants to ICE. He's not going to cooperate.
Yes.
As you have the Laken Riley trial
Of
playing
course.
out on national television with her mother sobbing in the courtroom, and you're going to stand there or sit there straight-faced and say that you have no intention of this. The reason Laken Riley is murdered is because some other loser police chief let him go after he was accused of assaulting a
It's an amazing thing.
17-year-old.
It's amazing to me that they choose to put themselves on. They are literally saying, and you see it with, I mean, this ridiculous vote. I agree with you. I totally would have assumed. I mean, is it SB 54? We're a sanctuary state, so I don't even know what this adds to that. I suppose it's the different bits of law enforcement. But I mean, the the thing is just, it's just stunning that they would literally say our priority is
Yep.
protecting criminals from the law rather than protecting our communities from the criminals. It's just,
Yep.
what are you talking about? How is that? And it shows you again the extent of the ideology, because it's all driven by this, that anything other than that is not delivering races, and they're not anti-racist, and it's just astonishing. It's astonishing, but they're showing no sign of changing it. And by the way, it's cruel, and it
It
hurts,
is.
as always. It hurts the exact people that they claim to stand up for. What actually happens in this situation? So let's say you have an illegal alien criminal, and they are released into the community, and they're not there's no cooperation with ICE. They're not locked down for deportation. Where do they go? They go back to their communities, and put those people at risk. And then both in terms of actual, further crime and wrongdoing, or if ICE now has to come and find them rather than just being cooperated with, then you've got ICE now going into those communities, which is
I
exactly what
know.
they wanted to prevent. And they could have prevented it if they actually cooperated in the first place.
It's sickening, and it really you would think after this huge and I'm not even talking about Trump's victory, but I'm talking about the passage of Prop 36, George Gascon thrown out, everything we saw in San Francisco and Oakland. The voters in California are speaking that they're done, and it's not just Republicans. This is everybody, Democrats, no party preference. Everybody is shouting that we're done with this. And so it's disappointing to me because I was hopeful for Jim McDonnell for about 5 seconds, but it just shows, and I don't believe he probably even believes what he's saying, but he's probably doing it just to get the job, to make his $500,000 a year, which is his salary as police chief, more than the president makes. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And so he's going to do what it takes to keep his job and to keep Karen Bass happy. But the silver lining, Steve, because I always like to look at the positive side. I'm a Dodger fan. You know this. I went crazy. The Dodgers won the World Series. If you watch Game 5, and that's the game where the Dodgers clinched the World Series, the Dodgers were not any better than the Yankees in that game. The Yankees actually defeated themselves. They made errors. They were just making mistakes all over the place. The Dodgers were able to capitalize, and that's how they won the World Series in Game 5. This is what the left in California is doing. They are not getting the memo. They are not reading the tea leaves. They are not listening to voters. Instead, they're just doubling down on crazy
Yes.
and
Yes.
ridiculousness. So you know what we do in the next 2 years? We capitalize on their idiocy.
Exactly.
And we
Right.
win. And so that's
I
my
totally
silver
agree.
lining.
I
Not even
know.
going
I
to get
agree.
mad about it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's no. That's right. And the whole reaction, I mean, across the country, you do have some Democrats like Seth Moulton, and I've noticed in
Yes.
Massachusetts, a few others saying, come on, the voters sent us a message. Let's listen to it. Not here, not at all. They're saying, no, we're going to carry on as before, doubling down on crazy, exactly as you say. There's another story. What's the other story that you want to talk about?
Oh, just a little funny one, putting Gavin Newsom in the hot seat. I mean, not that the Menendez brothers are funny, but you know that George Gascon was really fighting for his life. He did read the tea leaves, and he knew he was losing to Nathan Hochman. So what did he do? Well, he capitalized on the popularity of Netflix and these Menendez brothers documentaries that have been coming out. The Menendez brothers killed their parents, have been in jail for 35 years, but there are claims of abuse. Now, look, it doesn't matter whether or not you think the Menendez brothers should be let out of jail or not. It is just interesting the timing of George Gascon. I mean, I know his hobby is letting people out of jail, to be fair, but he comes out so he can find a microphone, so he can find cameras in the run up to the election to say, you know what, guys, I think I might let these Menendez brothers out of jail. And sure enough, he reads their case files and he recommends resentencing. Well, Nathan Hochman wins, and the resentencing date has not been, I think it was middle of December 15th. So Nathan Hochman's going to be in office. He gets sworn in on December 2nd. So anything George Gascon promised is out the window. And now Nathan Hochman is being asked over and over again at what he's going to do with the Menendez brothers. Well, he's done the right thing, and I'm giving him credit for this. He says, before I make any decisions, I actually need to read the confidential information in their case files before I can make any recommendation, and I need time to do that. So he said he's going to take the time and review. Well, naturally, the next push from the media is to go to Gavin Newsom, who would ultimately have to sign off on clemency for the Menendez brothers. And George Gascon, Gavin Newsom's buddy, I think actually put him in a hot seat, Steve. He painted him into a corner because now Newsom is being asked about whether or not he's going to let the Menendez brothers out of jail. And keep in mind, this is Gavin Newsom who wants to be president, and he's going to start his campaign in 2 years. And so he's either got to make the decision to let them out and look soft on crime to the rest of the nation, because this is so high profile, it will get headlines, or keep them in jail serving out their life sentence, and then he looks like he is not into criminal justice reform. So it made me laugh that George Gascon's last attempt to save his own rear end actually is probably going to cost Gavin Newsom, as he tries to create an image for himself with the rest of the country.
I mean, it's so funny, and exactly, the whole thing was such a ploy, for Gascon. I mean, when does it play out? So what's the timeline on this?
The court case for the Menendez brothers resentencing was December 15th. And, the family, which is so weird in this case because it's also the victim's family, right? The family of Kitty and Jose are actually advocates to let Lyle and Eric out of jail. And so they have had a heavy hand in trying to get this resentencing done, and they wanted it done before the holidays. So the date was, I think, December 15th, but Nathan Hochman is sworn in on December 2nd. So he has thrown that date out because he's got to actually go through all the
So we
files
don't know. So it could
himself.
be going on for ages. So
It-
Gavin's wondering what he's going to do. And amazing. It's amazing.
I definitely do. I would be surprised if it's before the holidays, as the family wishes. It's an
By the way,
interesting one.
what's going to happen with Gascon? I have this sort of horrible feeling he's going to end up somewhere and keep doing damn it, like he's not going to go away. That's my
I
feeling.
feel like that too. It's sort of like this doom that I feel about Kamala Harris deciding she might want to run for governor or something.
Yes.
I mean, I guess that would be a great day for all of us because she has trouble stringing together sentences. But it seems like that is the fate. They can't just go away. They can't take their loss and go home. They have to
Yes.
run again.
And can't seem to sort of think of anything else to do.
Right.
Like
You can't live off the public dime. What else are you supposed to do?
Yes, exactly. I mean, that was the amazing thing about there was I'm sure it was unintentional, but in one of the early reports of all this with Kamala and everything, the phrasing was so interesting. The CNN report, I don't think they meant anything by it, to be fair, but it just was funny. They said, well, she may do this, she may do that, and then she may want to become California governor. I love that word "become." You just get appointed to it, maybe, get coronated again, not go to the trouble of actually running for it, just become it.
Yep.
It was amazing.
Look, I think she might have it easy with the other Democrats in the race, but she's going to have a hard time going up against a strong Republican candidate.
Yes.
So,
and the interesting thing is if she does that, whether the other Democrats who've already in the race will just sort of back off and say, okay, fine, we won't run against you. Or they say, hang on a second, what? You've just been rejected by the country, and we've been plugging away here in California with our own campaigns. And what, we're supposed to just kind of bow down before you and exit the race so that you can have I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I don't know how the there'll be all sorts of shenanigans. They think they own this state. They think that they can sort of stitch it up.
Again, we use that to our benefit, though. Their stupidity
exactly.
and their lack of seeing reality and these shifts, it's going to be to our benefit.
I think so. And I think that if they really seriously try and run a failed and rejected Washington machine politician here, I think that's going to be a very, very rich target. It's an insult to California, it really is.
And just especially the idea that she can just waltz right in there if that's her desire, that that was the problem that offended so many people with her presidential run, is that even Democrats didn't like that she didn't have to earn a vote. So
yes.
I think you can't just expect people to accept whoever the Democrats decide to coronate.
Well, we will see. We're going to keep an eye on it. That's all in the future. Jen, thank you so much. That was fun, as always.
Thank you, Steve. Always fun with you.
I'll see you on Friday morning, bright and early. It's very embarrassing. I missed the other day my time slot, and you were very apologetic. But for those who are who are super fans of both of us, 10 to 6, 10 to 7 on Friday mornings, you can see me there with
6
Jen and Grant.
Club.
All right, very good. Thank you, Jen. Great to see you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, I am incredibly excited for this conversation. What did President Trump used to say? You're going to get tired of winning, so much winning. Well, we are now going to meet someone who's been winning a lot and some very important battles. Of course, you've been following the story of voter ID in Huntington Beach in Orange County, California. The voters voted for voter ID in March in the primaries this year in a ballot initiative. And guess what happened next? The great defenders of democracy, the Democrats, Gavin Newsom, Rob Bonta, the state attorney general, piled on. You can't have what you want, they said to the voters. They tried to overturn that election. They tried to sue the city of Huntington Beach. They've gone full tilt trying to overturn this. And one man has stood in their way. And he joins us now, Michael Gates, the city attorney of Huntington Beach, a fantastic fighter on so many fronts. Hopefully we'll get into a lot of the battles that you've been fighting and winning. You really are the standard bearer right now for how to fight, how Republicans can fight and win in California. Great to see you, Michael. Tell us, just to start with the voter ID thing. I've given the sort of headlines there, but tell us exactly what happened and why you had such a significant victory just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, well, this really stems from elections of the past, whether it's 2020, 2022. The new city council that we have in Huntington Beach after the 2022 election said, you know what, Huntington Beach really should do something in response to all of the concerns about election integrity. So what the city council decided to do was to present to the voters in this past primary, as you mentioned, a package of election integrity measures, one of which is the voter ID. Another is that we would have 20 more in-person voting places throughout the city. And then also the monitoring of ballot drop boxes. And believe it or not, to add to everything that you mentioned, prior to that item, that package going onto the ballot in March, Attorney General Bonta sent an open letter to Huntington Beach threatening that all of this was violative of state law. So you probably could chalk that up as election interference, because he literally tried to threaten the city and to intimidate voters with this strongly worded letter. Notwithstanding, the voters looked past that. They adopted these measures, and now Huntington Beach has really the first election integrity package at the local level, which includes voter ID, as you mentioned, in the entire state of California. So there's 482 cities in the state, and we're the only one that has it. And since then, they've sued us. We've gone to court. We fought. We prevailed on this first round, and we're looking to more victories to come.
So let's just go into the details, because I just think it's, we got time to do that here. And I want everyone to understand, because it's so shameless and brazen the way they did this. So what actually happened? So who filed a lawsuit? I said I kind of use Newsom and Rob Bonta interchangeably. What was the actual process?
So the process is Attorney General Bonta sued the city of Huntington Beach in April after the measures passed in March. And basically, Bonta went to court claiming that the city's charter amendment, just having voter ID now baked into our charter, violates state law. Now, what's interesting is that after Attorney General Bonta sued Huntington Beach, there was also legislation presented to Governor Newsom months later that basically outlawed or banned voter ID anywhere in the state of California, directly in response to Huntington Beach passing its voter ID measure. Now, what's interesting about that is, why did they pass that law at the behest of Senator David Mann originally, and then at the pleasure of Governor Newsom? Why did they pass that law if Attorney General Bonta was right in his letter of, I don't know, February of this year or January of this year, where he said the upcoming ballot initiative in Huntington Beach violates state law? You can't have it both ways. It was either illegal then or it's illegal now. So you can't have it both ways. I just think they don't know what they're doing in Sacramento. Honestly, Steve, I just don't think they know what they're doing.
So their lawsuit after the event, which was really giving teeth to the warning that he gave before the event, was based on what legal principle? That you said the Constitution. What did they claim is the violation of the state constitution?
So their original allegation was it violated state law, state elections code. And really, if you sort of analyze where the state elections code was and our law, our local voter ID law, our local voter ID actually furthered the state elections code. Because what the state elections code is, any elections official at a polling place, in-person polling place, when somebody comes to approach them to vote, that elections official is supposed to ask for the person's name and address. That's built into state law. So our voter ID requirement just furthered that. It was not in conflict with that. So that was their original allegation, is that somehow the voter ID law in Huntington Beach was in conflict with state elections law, but it really wasn't. So then they passed another law at the state level saying, hey, we're just going to ban voter ID statewide. And so now Huntington Beach's new voter ID law is illegal. But what really strikes at the heart of the issue is that Huntington Beach, as a charter city, we have control over our local elections. And where do we get that control? Where do we have that authority? Not from state law. We have it from the California Constitution. So I would refer listeners to the California Constitution, Article 11, Section 5B, subsections 3 and 4 specifically say that charter cities have plenary authority. Those words are in the Constitution. Plenary authority over local elections, the control of local elections. So the city of Huntington Beach believes it is on firm foundation. We're rock solid firm on our constitutional authority to have this type of control over local elections, namely to require a voter ID.
So I've got a few questions. So first of all, just to clarify these terms, when they claimed originally that it was contrary to the state election code, that is that different from claiming that it's against the state constitution?
Yes, the state constitution is the state's highest legal
Right.
authority. State laws are subordinate to the Constitution. Those are passed by the legislature. So the
Right.
entire elections code that we're referring to
That's
is
in
just
the-
state law. Those are
Got it.
state
So it's
statutes,
not in the constitution. So
not in the Constitution.
so there was a sort of inherent contradiction in their argument. But now this law that they're now referring to, which they got passed at Newsom's instigation, basically after you did this, kind of is the latest word on it in terms of state law. But the Constitution, your grounds for making the constitutional point is that your status as a charter city. Could you explain that to people who don't really know about what that is compared to other cities that are not charter cities?
Absolutely. So a charter city is a city that has adopted a charter, which is really considered by California law, case law, as a local constitution. Decades and decades ago, Steve, California constitutional conventions, there it was decided, frankly, that California was so big, geographically so big, and with so many cities, that governance in the state was going to be shared between the state and charter cities, local governance. So frankly, there are certain areas of governance that are reserved for the state, like waste management, right? Health, education, things of that nature. But then there are other things that are considered municipal affairs reserved for local governance beyond what case law says is beyond the reach of state legislation. So it's very clear. There are bright lines in the California Constitution and case law flowing from California Constitution, which has interpreted the Constitution, that says that these municipal affairs are for the localities to govern. And that includes local elections, that includes control of police departments, and that also includes like land use decisions, zoning, managing of resources. So it is shared governance in California between the state and charter cities.
And how many of the 482 cities are charter cities?
121.
This is really interesting. And are you one of the big? Does it tend to be all sizes of city? You know, like what name some of the other cities that people will have heard of?
Yeah, so 121 charter cities. They're usually the larger cities, the more I would say probably less rural is the best way to put it. A lot of rural cities are general law cities. They're not charter cities. But if you're an urban city, a more developed city, a larger city, you're probably a charter city. Los Angeles is a charter city. San Francisco is a charter city. San Diego is a charter city. Sacramento, so on and so forth. So 121 out of 482. But most of the population of California resides in a charter city. So in excess of about 70% of the population resides in charter cities.
Right. And that's in the Constitution. And the powers reserved to the charter cities are itemized in the Constitution. In the article that you cited, 11, section 15B, subsection, whatever it was.
Yes, Article 11, Section 5, subsection A and B. Subsection A is a general grant of municipal authority to charter cities, and then subsection B is a specific grant with core municipal functions granted to charter cities. Absolutely.
Really interesting. So to me, this is a little bit like the equivalent of my obsession in terms of national politics, which is the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, which I cite the whole time, especially now when we're talking about decentralizing power and Vivek and Elon and what they're up to with the federal government and the bureaucracy. And the 10th Amendment to the US Constitution is, the first bit is, I'm summarizing, the powers not specifically listed in the Constitution, here I'm quoting, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And basically what you're talking about here is the California equivalent of that for charter cities, which are the majority of people of California live in.
Yes, and the California Constitution is like the federal Constitution. The California Constitution is a constitution of limited government. So powers for the legislature are well defined. The powers for the governor are well defined. And really anything beyond that might be considered a local matter is reserved as a local municipal affair. And here's the thing, what's really important, I think that people tend to lose because we think of Sacramento as just being so powerful. And well, the state says, so we must. It's become, frankly, very tyrannical. Well, in large part, it's because charter cities over the years, over the decades, have I guess sat on their hands or neglected to
I
assert
love
the
this
charter
argument.
city authority.
Yeah,
So our charter city authority has really kind of eroded over the years, and we're fighting to get that back. And that's what Huntington Beach is doing. We're
I
at the
love it.
forefront of getting that back.
I love it. I mean, I love this. It's such a parallel to what I've been arguing. Um, by the way, everyone should know, you and I are friends. We've met over the last few months, and we've talked a lot. So everyone should be clear about that. And I really enjoy talking to you. But I'm super excited because we've never got into this particular aspect of it, the parallel with national government as we've been talking about these issues. But the thing that I always say about the 10th Amendment is it's broken the whole time. All these federal bureaucracies and departments, and why on earth is the federal government getting involved in things that are obviously, not in the Constitution and clearly in sort of any kind of reasonable sense would be local and state matters, for example, whether that's housing or education, all these things. Well, because the states have given up their power. And I keep asking, I had people on my Fox News show the whole time, legal scholars and whatever's like, why aren't the states fighting back? Why aren't they suing the federal government over this encroachment on their reserve powers under the 10th Amendment? And it's the same dynamic here. But finally, we have someone in the shape of you who really is fighting back and really is standing up for the rights of these cities. It's really exciting.
Well, we're at the forefront. We feel, I think, in large part, Steve, it's a sense of need and maybe even desperation because, you may recall during 2020 when COVID struck and there was a pandemic and there was a shutdown. Churches were shut down and grocery stores were shut down and banks were shut down. But in Huntington Beach, we had our beaches, and we are the 23rd largest city in the state of California out of 482 cities. So we're very large, 27 square miles, but we have 8 miles of pristine coastline. And during that summer of COVID, so many people in Huntington Beach were going to the beach, sitting on the warm sand, feeling the warm sun, trying to kill the virus, right? And enjoy some aspect of life that was left to enjoy. Well, Newsom took exception to that. He came down to Huntington Beach and to other beach cities in Orange County and shut our beaches down with armed state troopers, concrete barricades, and bulldozers to push sand onto walkways and bike paths. He literally forcefully shut our beaches down. Well, we in Huntington Beach took him to court. And within 48 hours, he opened up his beaches again because I think he saw the writing on the wall. But we have a history of fighting Newsom and pushing back and asserting our local control, even on land use with these high density housing mandates.
Yes.
He's trying to cram down into Huntington Beach.
Can I get to that as a separate item in a second? I really want to spend some time on that. Before we leave the general conversation, I would love to understand the interaction with county government. So you're in Orange County, one of the biggest and wealthiest in the state. I'm there often. I was there last night with you and others, your colleagues in Huntington Beach and across the county. What is the interaction, charter cities and the counties within which they exist? How does that work?
Yeah, fair question. So charter counties can also be charter counties. They have certain authorities defined by the California Constitution as well. But you have to think of counties a little bit more of a subdivision of the state. Counties are designed essentially to execute the functions of the state. So when it comes to health, like I said earlier, regulation of health and health management, the state effectuates that through the county authorities, right? Same with education, through the county authorities, even police powers through the county authorities. So counties are a different animal than charter cities because they do have to deliver on what the state has requested, what the state effectively mandates. Charter cities, though, can stand apart. We really do. I don't want to say we stand alone because we co-govern with the state of California, but we are much more independent than counties are. So we effectively make our land use decisions here. We manage our own police department here. We tax and spend with our local monies here on our own. And that's totally different than the county. The county's dependent on the state, where we are less dependent on the state. And going to your point earlier about why states have rolled over to the federal government, why cities have rolled over to the state, in large part, it's because of the money, right? The federal government has offered states, hey, you cooperate,
Yeah.
we're going to buy your cooperation. We will give you money. And likewise, the state historically has said, hey, cities, we're essentially going to buy you off. We're going to give you money. We'll offer you grants. We'll subsidize various things as long as you do what we say. And Huntington Beach has pushed back. In fact, even on the housing, which I know we'll get to, but we've risked SB2 funding. We've risked $1 million a year in subsidies from the state of California. And we're willing to risk that because that fight on housing is so important to us. So we're standing up saying, you know what, even if it means it's going to cost us forego state subsidies or assistance from the state, we're willing to do that.
So just before we leave the where we started in terms of voting, one question I had, I just wanted to clarify, which is when the charter language gives you control over local elections, does that mean that you have two separate ballots, and one you need a voter ID for local elections, and then for state and national and federal elections or statewide ballot initiatives or whatever, that's a separate ballot for which you don't need voter ID? How does that all work?
So our ballot initiative this past March provided for the voter ID and other elections integrity measures here in the city to take place in 2026 and thereafter. So we haven't implemented the program yet. We don't particularly have a program yet. We just had an election right here in November. So we're going to update our city council here. And so we're going to have a new city council, and how this program, these elections integrity measures, are going to be implemented in the city remains to be seen. It could be the type of thing where we have a good working relationship with the county, and the county cooperates with us, and then we're allowed to require the showing of voter ID at the current in-person polling places. Or it could be theoretically on the other end of the spectrum where the city says, you know what, maybe we'll conduct our own elections. We'll print our own ballots and we'll have our own election. And we could even have a different election day. City of Redondo Beach, they control their own local elections. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities to say that, the city could go to that extreme. I don't know that they will. I don't want to get ahead of the city council.
Yeah, you want to figure it out. Got it.
A lot of different options on the table.
So let's talk about the land use, zoning, and all of that. Did you say that land use is specifically listed as a charter city reserve power?
So it's not specifically enumerated, but it has been historically, if you go back through decades of court decisions, it's been considered a local municipal affair. Again, there's sort of co-governance because there's certain aspects of land use that is a statewide concern that the state has weighed in on. So for instance, if a city is going to zone, they have to have a general plan, and there has to be 7 mandatory elements of a general plan. Okay. That's a state law. The city's never disputed that. But what's in those elements has now come into dispute. So the city of Huntington Beach has said, hey, you can't tell us, state of California, what to put in our elements. So you can't tell us, like they're trying to now, that we're now going to have to plan for and build 40,000 plus new units of high density housing in the state of California. That's what California is mandating. That's what the city's pushing back on. And that's why we're currently in court.
So that as I understand it, that's this thing called RHNA, right? Is it the Regional Housing Needs Assessment? That's the acronym. And that's a state thing. And that's the state, is it the housing agency? What's the name of it? It's got some name like that.
HCD, the State Housing Authority.
Okay. So they produce these numbers, and they say very explicitly, do they do it by city, county? Like, how do they break it? And what's their process, right? They go through and they say, look, this is how much housing we need, and this is how much you have to have Huntington Beach, and this is how much San Francisco should have, and so on. That's the process they go through, right?
So a quick thumbnail sketch. So the state comes up with a big number, then it gets subdivided down to regional councils like the Southern California Association of Governments. Then that regional council breaks it down to the cities. So our number in Huntington Beach in this cycle has been 13,368 units. What they're saying is RHNA. They're also trying to call it, Steve, I think deceptively, affordable housing. It is not affordable housing. It is high density housing, because
how can they specify that? So they go beyond just saying you've got to provide this much housing. I mean, look, I'm pro housing, right? I've made a huge focus of we have a housing crisis. And by the way, just for anyone who hasn't heard me talk about this before, the main reason we have the highest housing costs in America is actually Democrat policy, particularly their climate policies, which makes it impossible to build anywhere, to extend the urban footprint, the development footprint, even though only 5% of our land in California is developed, and we've got plenty of room, and plenty of counties want to expand, and they hate that, and they call it sprawl, even though that's how people want to live in single family homes, etc. Right? So we can get into all that argument, but the thing that so I'm very pro housing, just to be clear. But so they give you this number, and is it correct to say they don't just say, right, fine, put this number in and you do it however you want? Do they, how prescriptive are they in terms of telling you what to do?
Well, it's very prescriptive. So I'll give you an example of the 13,368 units of RENA that's mandated on Huntington Beach. Only about 8,100 units are designated as affordable housing, but even all of those aren't particularly affordable. But then, Steve, you add that state housing law requires developers to develop at a 20% inclusionary rate. So it would require the city of Huntington Beach to plan for and develop 41,000 units of this high density just to meet the 13,368 unit requirement. Now, imagine too that a lot of cities throughout the state of California are undeveloped and they have undevelopable land. That's not Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach, I said, is 27 square miles. But in terms of our developable land, we're fully developed. There's really nowhere to put anything. So what the state is requiring Huntington Beach to do when it says, hey, you have a housing mandate to build, what they're saying is Huntington Beach has to redevelop. Like, we literally have to identify properties that are already developed, like our commercial, our business, our industrial, and we have to put overlays for high density housing so that when those properties turn over, that they then become high density residential. So Huntington Beach has now this additional burden of having to redevelop already developed properties. So it's completely untenable. What the state should be doing, to your point of more housing, is go to cities and identify areas where there's undeveloped, developable land, and then incentivize those cities and incentivize development, rather than coming in with a stick, come in with a carrot to cities that want. That there are cities out there, Steve, like San Bernardino, eager to have more housing. But because of the environmental regulations, like you said, and the environmental protections over, I don't even know what some of these plants are. They're protecting these plants in the undeveloped areas that they can't build.
I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but I don't want to, because I want to come back to your, the state of your legal battles. But at the same time as they're saying you can't touch, you can't expand the development footprint at all because of various plants, whatever. They have no problem with building some massive solar farm or some massive wind farm or whatever, because that's a sort of approved type of development, which destroys the ecosystems and whatever. That's all fine, right? It's just people that they don't like. It's just amazing. And also I mean, it's the other ludicrous thing about it, that there's this thing that, again, people need to be aware of, which is VMT, vehicle miles traveled, which they put into the calculation, don't they, for whether or not you get, the taxes you pay and everything, which is, if you build here, that means there will be more vehicle miles traveled because people will be commuting back and forth or whatever. And that's a bad thing for climate reasons. But again, at the same time, as they're saying everyone has to have electric cars, so why do they even care about that? The whole thing is just, it basically is an anti-growth mentality. That's what's going on here. And the way I sometimes put it is, like, yes, we do have a housing shortage, and that's why one of the reasons the price is so, it's not the only reason. I mean, the taxes are forcing up the prices, all these impact fees that places are levying, including state agencies. Anyway, just to your point about San Bernardino, I say, look, before we force new housing into communities that don't want it, why don't we actually allow the housing to be built in the places that do want it? Wouldn't that be a sensible place to start?
And if I could add, the other side of the coin for Huntington Beach is, when these mandates were studied by an outside environmental firm. So anytime there's a massive zoning update like this for a city, the city has to hire an outside environmental firm to study the proposal and to analyze and evaluate and quantify the impacts of the proposal on the city's environment. And you might be surprised to hear, I know your audience will, that in Huntington Beach's case, with the 13,368 units, it was determined, the findings by the environmental firm found that the proposal would, if fully implemented, would deplete our groundwater source. Our groundwater, it would increase greenhouse gases, it would increase pollution, it would increase noise pollution, it would disturb the wildlife here. I mean, the amount of permanent, substantial, and unavoidable impacts to our environment from this very proposal, the list was long, Steve. And it's shocking to me that the state has the audacity with their, what we call as a tyrannical mindset to come in and do this cram down of high density in Huntington Beach, really at any cost, including the cost to our environment. And these are costs to our environment and to our taxpayers and to our quality of life that will be here permanently for generations.
So let's just wrap it up with I just want to get the status of these legal battles. So let's just continue with the housing one, that end with the voter ID and your victory, just exactly the nature of that victory recently. So on housing, where's your legal, because they sued you, you're suing them back, that's been a back and forth. Where does that all stand?
Very quickly, the state sued the city of Huntington Beach for rejecting the 13,368 unit high density mandate back in March of 2023. And the state went into court and said, hey, we want swift relief, Your Honor. In 128 days, we want you to order Huntington Beach to adopt this high density housing scheme, housing element. And we've been in litigation ever since with no court order looming over our head. There was no 120 days. We're now up on appeal. So I don't want to bore you with the details, but that's ongoing litigation. Since the beginning of that lawsuit, the state has got nothing of what it wanted out of the lawsuit. So we can consider that a victory, even if for right now it's a moral victory.
You're keeping them at bay for the time being.
We're absolutely keeping them at bay. And here we are about to approach 2025, and they've literally not even laid a hand on us. And so I have high hopes that that litigation is going to turn well.
And which level of court is this being decided?
So this is in the State Court of Appeal, but we also sued the state of California in federal court. And this is the case that's currently, we've just filed a petition for rehearing in the Ninth Circuit. Basically, the federal courts are not liking the fact that the city, as a charter city, has brought a federal claim against the state of California in federal court, because Article 11 of the U.S. Constitution limits the cases that can be heard in federal court. But we believe that we've got a compelling, strong argument that as a charter city, and our mayor and mayor pro tem at the time, who brought these federal claims in federal court, we believe that we're going to succeed, even if we end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. And so we are willing and ready to take this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a very great question of law. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court would probably love nothing more than to take a shot at rectifying or reconciling the disparity in the way the different circuits have handled this type of case in federal court. So I'm absolutely looking forward to that.
And really the kind of point of law there is the ability of the state to override charter city decision making.
The gravamen of the city's case there is that the housing laws by the state of California, as they're imposed on Huntington Beach, a charter city, are violative of federal law.
Interesting.
Federal law, First Amendment, 14th Amendment, Commerce Clause, and so on and so forth. Absolutely. It's fascinating. I don't think you have time to get into it, but it really is.
Let's come back and do that. I really, because I don't right now. I want to get into this. It's really interesting. Finally, then, your recent victory on voter ID. We're taping this on Tuesday, November the 19th. I think this was handed down on Friday. You had a good result. But it sounded like that's sort of an interim result.
Yeah, so it's the beginning of a fight. It's like a boxing match. There's going to be many rounds to this, I'm sure. But the state went into court and said the city of Huntington Beach's charter amendment to have now voter ID at the local level in Huntington Beach is a violation of state law. And the court said at this stage, at this juncture, it sees no conflict. But it's notable, the state absolutely believed that it was in conflict, and it even cited its new law. It was SB 1174, but now it's the voter ID ban law that Newsom signed into law in September. The state put that front and center in front of the court and said, there is a conflict. You have on the one hand, the city's voter ID in their charter here, but then on the other hand, you have SB 1174 here, and they're in direct conflict. And the court said, no, I don't see a conflict, at least not at this stage. And so it basically dismissed the state's case. It is giving them an opportunity to refile. But I will tell you, Steve, there's no way they can refashion the allegations against the city or the voter ID in Huntington Beach that will cure the defects. There are defects in their case that they cannot cure. So I think they may take it up on appeal. They may refile, who knows, but a great victory. It's definitely a rebuke of Attorney General Bonta and his efforts to constantly be going after Huntington Beach, attacking Huntington Beach, punishing Huntington Beach, a categorical rebuke. In fact, you put out a press statement late on Sunday night that basically said, he believes the court got it wrong and so on and so forth, which is absolutely hysterical. The court got it right. It's really Attorney General Bonta who has been getting it wrong. And the more they overreach, Steve, the more Attorney General Bonta overreaches and Newsom overreaches, the more they're going to get caught, right? The more the courts are going to have to say, wait a second, you're going too far, you're going too far, you're going too far. And I know that when all of this is said and done, we're going to prevail in this case as well.
Well, that's only going to happen if people fight and take it to a court in the first place. And that's why what you're doing is so crucial, and your attitude is the great thing to celebrate here, as well as the specific victories you're having along the way. Michael Gates, fantastic to see you. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. So as you know, in the run-up to the elections, we had Candidate Corner. We'd bring on our great candidates running for office here in California. And then we had the election. I thought, well, that's the end of Candidate Corner, because, they're not candidates anymore. And so, we'll see them over the years. But actually, what's so exciting is that we've got some of these great candidates who have won. They're winners. And I'm incredibly excited to welcome them back. And here's the first one up today, someone you've met before on this show. He's a friend of mine. He's fantastic. Jeff Gonzalez flipped a seat in the California State Assembly, a really, really big and fantastic result that means a lot. I was really proud to be with you yesterday, Jeff. We're taping this on Tuesday, November the 19th. On Monday, you had an event in Palm Desert and the Coachella Valley to celebrate and take full credit for this incredible win. But I'd love you to tell us a little bit, for those who haven't met you before, just describe your district, why it means so much, and what this means actually for the future of the Republican Party in California. So I think that is the really big story here.
It's the most southern district in California. And the district encompasses Imperial County, Riverside County, and San Bernardino County. I think it's over 10,000 square miles, if not a little bit more, probably the size of a state. It's heavily Latino, heavily Spanish speaking, but it's the hardworking people of this community, from agriculture to hospitality to teaching to law enforcement across the board, that make up this amazing district.
And so it was Democrat held and you flipped it. And how did you do that?
That's the secret sauce that everyone keeps asking me about, is how did I flip this district to make it become a Republican district? The reality of it is I just listened. I worked harder than my opponent, and that's one of the keys to probably doing this. And I listened, and I went from corner to corner and just opened my ears and shut my mouth.
And why do you think that's so effective? I mean, people not used to having politicians even bother to cut in. Does it signify that the Democrats, previous incumbent and so on, take these communities for granted?
I think so. I think they take them for granted. And a lot of folks talked to me about that. They said they don't even come out here. One person said, I don't know what office you're running for or who you are, but the fact that you came to my business, I'm voting for you, because no one else has done that. So this is the type of folks that want to be heard. They want to be a part of the process, and they've been treated almost like second-class citizens. And to have someone just go out and listen to them and listen to their struggle makes the difference in the world.
And when you were out there and doing that, and did it come up that, well, you're a Republican and we have certain preconceptions about what a Republican is and what that means?
100% that came up all the time. It was you're Republican, you're a racist, you're a bigot. And I said, hold on one second. Let's get to know each other first before we start throwing names out at each other. And really it was a matter of just having a conversation and seeing where we met at in the middle. And come to find out that we met at a lot of different places. We agreed on so many different things. And that's where we started to build a relationship from. We built a foundation of where do we align so that way we can start building a coalition together.
And that coalition was real. I mean, you had a whole kind of part of your campaign. I mean, official Democrats for Gonzalez, and I met some of the leaders of that yesterday. Tell us about that and how that all happened.
We had Democrats for Gonzalez, veterans for Gonzalez, LGBT for Gonzalez, regular working folks. We had everything for Gonzalez. Why? Because we didn't come in there with politics first. We came in there with people first, with the mind of what does the community want to see? And when I put people over politics, they opened up their doors.
But you must, I mean, okay, I hear the point about listening, but then they say, well, what are you going to do? What's your plan? How do you respond to, what difference will you make if we send you to Sacramento to represent us? How did you get into that? And how you made that more compelling than what the
Sure.
Democrats have been delivering and offering?
I told them the plan actually begins with you. It begins with you and I having a conversation. It doesn't begin with me in Sacramento creating these laws and these bills up on high and they impact you. No, that's not how we're going to do things around here. The way we're going to do it is we're going to start, as we say in the Marine Corps, at the tactical level, at the ground level. What are the things that you want to see change? Great. You want to see them change? I need you to join my advisory group on changing X. And they look at me like, wait, you want me to be a part of your team? Absolutely. If you want change, you need to be a part of it. What we say in Spanish is, el que no habla, no come. The one who doesn't speak up doesn't eat. So for me, if you want to be a part of this change, join the team and use your voice.
And the thing that I just want to sort of put this in the context of is this argument that, I've been making for years, that the real opportunity for Republicans and Trump's really been his leadership of the party has kind of enabled this to happen. I used to describe it as an opportunity. Now it's a reality, which is that the Republican Party could become a multiracial working class coalition, particularly not just for the working class, but particularly focused on lifting people up who, work hard for a living and want to climb that ladder of opportunity. And that story, I think, was very much a part of the national election result that we saw a couple of weeks ago. How did you see that translating on the ground in your district and in your race?
Nationally, there was, at the beginning, there wasn't really much of an impact. But as the summer went through, the heat of the summer went through, I started seeing it play out a little bit more. And a lot of Democrat Latinos came up to me and said, Jeff, I don't want a handout. And just give me a hand up, right? Show me which way to go and I'll go. Show me how to create a business and I'll do it. Don't, give me handouts for free. They want to earn their way, right? That's how my dad taught me is you got to earn your way. And that's all they were asking for is to be treated like a regular person with regular opportunities. Some might not know the path. Just show them point them in the right direction and they'll make it happen. So that's what I think where if you will, the National Democratic Party lost on was treating them like they can't do it and they're not able to succeed. Well, look, I'm just your average everyday kid whose dad came from Mexico and mom from Puerto Rico. And we didn't grow up rich. My dad said, here's an opportunity, go take it and don't let anyone stop you.
Yes. Did you grow up middle class like Kamala Harris with a lawn that you really, really loved?
I wish that we would have grew up middle class. I joke around with my dad. I said we were so poor that the address that we had was 1, 2, 3 and a half. We shared the other half with a neighbor.
Okay. I think it's really exciting. Also there's a significant thing, just in terms of the changing Republican Party and the demographics. And I think the beautiful thing about the Republican argument is that it's not racially, determinative. It's not saying, well, as Kamala Harris did in the in the campaign. Here's our kind of black entrepreneurs plan and so on. The whole point of the Republican message is to lift up everyone
That's right.
through providing opportunity and to get the barriers out of the way, etc. However, it is significant in a state that's now where Latinos are the largest group and getting larger. If you look, roughly looking at the state population, 40% Latino. But if you look at the public schools, I think I'm right in saying it's 56% Latino right now. So that's the future. I mean, my organization, Golden Together, we put a report out. El futuro es Latino. The future is Latino. That's how it's going to be in California. So you being there and leading the way here, I think it's tremendously significant. And the fact that you're a Spanish speaker, I think these things matter. And you're going to be there in the legislature as part of the Republican caucus. And I think the Democrats have so arrogantly assumed that they own that whole thing, and you just show that that's not true.
Yeah, one of the things that's important to me, and I think it's important to all of us on the Republican side, is to know that we have colleagues on the other side that want to work together. We have colleagues, Democrat colleagues, that we want to be a team, and there has to be a little bit of a give and take, an imbalance, right? We can't all be thinking the same thing. It's the tug and the pull and tug of all of this that we need to have, and it's healthy to have this discourse. So I encourage my Democrat colleagues that are out there. I want to have conversation. I want to talk. I want to engage. So if you're out there and you're listening, please, my office is open, and let's fix the issues that California is having today.
Well, I'm so excited that you're there. Just very quickly, you mentioned Marines. You've had an amazing, amazing life so far. Can you just tick through what you've done? I mean, we haven't got time to hear all of it, and people can go back to our earlier conversations if they can find them. But just because you're a real star, and I want people to understand who you are a little bit and what you've done.
Thank you. I served in the Marine Corps for over 21 years, 4 tours to Iraq, 2 tours to Iraq, 2 tours to Afghanistan. I was on embassy duty in the Czech Republic and in South America, Central America, and I was on protection details for the Secretary of State. I was a pastor and a business owner, but most importantly, I'm a husband and dad of not only a special needs son with cerebral palsy, but 3 other amazing kids who are no longer kids anymore. But that's just a quick tidbit of who I am and who I'm representing. I'm representing my family.
Well, listen, Jeff, every time I see you, I'm just overwhelmed by your warmth and your spirit and your humanity. And I just think it's so fantastic that you're going to be there in Sacramento. I couldn't be more thrilled. I'm incredibly proud to know you and support you. Many, many congratulations. And, we'll stay in touch as you do great things for your district and for California. Thank you, Jeff. Last thing, where do people follow you? I mean, is it all your campaign stuff, but as they want to keep in touch with your work going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. They can follow me on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, through my website, Gonzalez with a Z, forassembly.com. I think you could probably follow me on MySpace, but who knows about that now.
Well, with my flip phone, but as we promised to say, there was my flip phone that we talk about every now and again. But if you have one of these, as we were discussing, you're a right Charlie, to use a British expression. You're fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. Great to see you. We'll see you very soon.
Thank you.
All right. I am so happy to welcome back to the show friends of mine. They're fantastic new faces of the Republican Party in California, just elected to the State Assembly. Ali Macedo, David Tangipa, both from the Central Valley, neighboring, right? Your districts border each other. Let's start with Ali. I think I've seen you more recently, David. You joined us just before the election. Ali, anyway, massive congrats to both of you. Ali, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Happy the campaign's done, but now the hard work really starts. So excited to get to work starting December 2nd when we're sworn in.
So just in terms of locate, so people who are watching or listening, who trying to sort of place you, you're both in the Central Valley. Just Ali, where's your district in relation to David's?
So I'm south of David's. For those of you that are familiar with California, I have all of Kings County, most of Tulare County, and South Fresno County.
Fantastic. And I'm going to now, we were just talking about this, David, but like I wanted to say, you are now, the two of you, the youngest members of the legislature. That's not quite right, but there's a good claim to fame here that you're the youngest guy and Ali is the youngest woman. Is that accurate?
Yes.
That is accurate.
He likes to remind people that he's still younger than me, but neither here nor there.
Fantastic. So let's talk about what you hope to achieve. So David, let's get into that. I mean, you're a new generation. I've known you for, ever since I've really got going and focusing on California politics. You were my very first meeting that we held for Golden together. And I always thought you just had this incredible energy and passion for California. And now you're there, you're in the assembly. What does it mean to you, and what are you looking forward to?
Steve, we've come a long way since that meeting. I mean, that
Right.
restaurant's no longer even open. So there's another one that California took from us too. But we've been putting in a lot of work. When you and I connected on this part, we talked about California can't afford gas, groceries, insurance. I mean, just being tired of it, and how this place is the most beautiful, most luxurious, everything is here. And yet we have these policies of scarcity that just make it so much harder for us. That's what we're taking on. And I think people, when I would tell them, I mean, I'm 28 years old. I am the youngest member of the assembly, just so Ali knows, that with that, we should embrace some new and modern ideas, because what else do we have to lose here in California? And I keep telling them, if being young shouldn't be something that people are worried about, because I've got the energy that it's going to take to change this place.
Ali, what's you're reflecting on? I mean, you've been working so hard. I've seen you. You're just always working. I've been in your part of the world a lot lately. What does it mean to you now that you've made it?
Well, we love having you here in the Central Valley, and that comes from that I'm hoping to take that same message that you've really immersed yourself in throughout the state, which is just how vital it is. What we do here in the Central Valley is to not just the state of California, but the entire world, which is that we feed the world. We're very proud to do that. And the state of California has made that a very difficult thing to do. They're depriving us of resources. They're demanding that we do more with less. They are strangling us with the regulation that just continues to pile on. And it's time that Ag's voice is heard and that the Central Valley's voice is heard. So I'm really excited that we have this new energy coming up to the Capitol, that we're going to make sure they hear us. And California's voices were heard loud in this last election of what they want. And it's not more of the same. And David and I are going to take that step from now.
What do you think, David, this one to you, what do you think about the, I mean, I had Carl DeMaio on the show just before the election, and, he's got a very sort of strong point of view that the Republican Party needs to have a more kind of fighting spirit in Sacramento. Where do you stand on that? I mean, I think you were telling me you're just on his show, I think, and you've connected with Carl. I mean, it feels to me like with you and Ali and Carl, and I just had Jeff Gonzalez on the show, this is really exciting, right? There's a real, maybe Leticia Castillo is going to be there. We've got a lot of new faces that are going to, I hope, shake things up. How do you sort of see that?
Yeah, I think that's so I was actually just talking to Carl at new member orientation, since they're bringing us up, and then we're just talking about just having the passion and the energy to really just, again, as I need to say it over, this is the most amazing place in the world, but we have these policies of scarcity that, are we supposed to just have less and like it? I don't think that's the way that we should operate. And if we look at just the position that we're in today, Republicans make up 19 with the pickup with Jeff in the assembly, and in the Senate side, we make up 9 out of 40. So 19 out of 80 and 9 out of 40. We're more of a glorified advisory board than we are legislators right now. So then let's start talking about the real issues and pointing out where we can be better. And I think that's what Carl's really determined for. He loves this place. He's got a heart for it. Jeff's got a heart for it and served our country. Leticia worked her tail off just trying to get there. And I told you before, I lived the American dream, but we're all going through the California nightmare because it's so hard just to be here, and people would rather leave this state than fight for it. I just don't think we need any more California refugees. We need some California rebels to really step up and fight for our home together.
I love that. Rebel. Yes, exactly. The early incarnation of this show was called California Rebel Base. That was my first name for it. So Ali, one thing I've really noticed when I've watched you in action, you're so steeped in the ag world, and you really know it, your family and your business and so on, and you really know what you're talking about. And what really strikes me from both of you when you talk about the issues is just this pragmatic problem solving, practical aspect. You're not ideologues. You're just trying to, make life better for people, solve problems. What are some of the specific things in terms of agriculture and the assault that our farmers are under? What are the kind of top priorities that you're going to be, focused on?
I mean, the primary one is going to be water, right? In agriculture, we fundamentally need two things, which is water and labor. And those are things that are correctable issues. The problem is we in the Central Valley, we're going through, an emergency order for the drought at the same time that we were going through, the flood. It was crazy to think about, but we've been caught flat-footed so many times when it comes to the water issue. And what I need people to understand, Democrat, Republican, you name it, is that we have to make these water investments, these infrastructure investments now, because if we don't, we're going to continue to pay the price for them. We know that the second a shovel hits the dirt for one of these projects or expanding an existing project, we're still 6 to 10 years out. And that's if, we don't have the green tape or the red tape coming in to slow it down. So it's a multifaceted issue that, Steve, you and I talked about Sigma before, and that's only addressing the groundwater aspect of water. There's a huge issue when it comes to our surface waterways throughout the state of California. This is not just an ag issue. This is an issue for our urban areas and our rural areas as well.
100%. And just for those who want to follow up on that particular issue, Golden and my organization, goldentogether.com. Obviously, David's on the advisory board there. We have a policy paper exactly on this issue that you might want to check out, water abundance. But Ali, going back to you on this, what can you do? I mean, you're going to speak with such authority. I mean, you are, I just know that I've seen you speak and you just really will let them have it. But what can you actually get done? Can you offer any hope to people that things you can have an impact? I mean, David laid out the numbers. I mean, right now it's not, we all know that math in terms of the Democrat supermajority, but what do you think you can actually accomplish?
Well, 100%, we're pushing for transparency in government spending. That's not a secret. The taxpayers right now are struggling to trust elected officials with their money. And we're seeing that where we're not passing statewide measures, but local measures are passing. So that's where, as far as that goes, there's the funding that was passed and approved for water infrastructure years ago. Where is that money? That is a question that we as Republicans can ask, but also as a taxpayer, we've been asking for a long time. But I see where water doesn't discriminate once again. And just in conversations casually with a lot of the incoming class of Democrat representatives, they're understanding when these urban areas don't have access to water, right? Or they're seeing extreme highs of nitrates in their water. So specifically, what I plan to do is identify the spending that was passed by the taxpayers, where that money is, and how far along we are on certain projects. Sites is a really prime example of that, right? We have done all of the environmental studies on it. Newsom said, hey, this is great. Let's cut all the red tape and let's just, full speed ahead. And then lo and behold, one wrench getting thrown into it and it stops the project in its tracks. But we've already invested millions and millions of dollars into these projects. So I'm not asking for a lot. A small improvement to existing infrastructure will go a really long way, but along the way, we have to address the regulation that is slowing these projects down to a halt, but also once these projects are here, making sure that water is getting to the people that know how to use it best, and that's farmers, in my opinion.
And David, do you think that the energy that you're going to bring and these new faces in the legislature, I don't know, I've just got this feeling that you're going to really wake things up and that you might get, I don't know, the media who've been so one-sided, and we all know that in California, but I think that you've got the capacity that you as a team, I think of you and Ali and Carl and of course Bill Asaley, who's great as a great fighter for common sense, and Jeff will be there, just really kind of, because you've got this kind of group, as it were, Leticia maybe, the media might pay attention. It's like, something's going on here. There's something happening.
Well, I think if we just talk about what people care about, I mean, that's the part where they really will start paying attention because, people it won't last. How many more utility bills before you can't pay your credit card bill? How many more insurance, whether quotes that you get quoted at $12,000 a year before they drop you next year because you're not going to get an insurance quote? How much more do Californians need to take before they say that they can't take enough? Because again, I still think about it like this way. The American Revolution started because of a 2% tax on an English breakfast drink. And yet Californians are really getting to the point right now to where it's time to step up. I mean, it is time to step up, and we can't just be complacent with what we're given right now. And so again, I'm excited because we do have Ali, we have Carl DeMaio, we have Jeff, we have and the other Republicans there that are just saying they've been standing up. But I think we bring some new tools. I have my master's in marketing, and I like to talk about the issues that people like to talk about and think about. I mean, and that's what we did with SB 14, because that made child sex trafficking a felony in California because people didn't even know that that was arguable. And if they just need to think about it, if child sex trafficking is arguable in California, how can those people fix the cost of living, insurance, food prices,
Well,
gas,
exactly.
groceries?
Well,
And that's the point where we got to wake people up on.
I mean, it just makes this, it underlies this point I've made elsewhere on this show, which is that the Democrats have just become so ideological and pursuing these things that make no sense at all, but it's just their ideology. And actually, the Republican Party, and Trump's had a big hand in this, but you're representing it at the state level, have become the pragmatic ones, the problem solvers. We're not interested in ideology. We just want to fix problems, make people's lives better. And just the way you talk about everything expresses that.
Well, and that's what, and Ali and I have been talking about this a lot. It is a privilege for somebody to worry about their carbon footprint, because that means they don't have to
Right.
worry about paying their mortgage at the end of the month. That means they're not scared that their kids have food on the table. So, because I was poor, broke, and homeless less than 10 years ago. And I could tell you this, not once did I ever think, what can I do today to lower my carbon footprint so I can make sure that I'm doing my part? All I cared about when I was living out of my 1994 Volkswagen Passat was if I can find enough money so I could use a military discount, 10% off at a Jack in the Box for 99-cent tacos. I never thought about these type of privileges before. All I thought about was what could I do to make it to the end of the day, let alone the end of the month. And now the Democrats have become the party of privilege. They have the privilege to make all of these policies of scarcity, to make it harder, because they answer to the elite who can afford an electric car, who can afford their home already, who have already bought. And we've got to be answerable to the people again. And that's what I think that we're going to really work on.
It reminds me of something I used to say all the time back, and I've said it for years. I said it first in 2016 after Brexit, when Trump was elected, and I first started at Fox News, and I said, look, this new Republican Party got the opportunity to become a multiracial working class coalition, and that's happened now with Trump. And you see it across the country, and you see it in the data around this election. But the other part of it, I always used to say, what you just said, it really reminded me of it. But like, if that happens, we leave the Democrats stranded as the party of the rich, white, and woke. And that's basically happening as well. And it's not a great place for them to be in. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of reflection. We've been talking about that elsewhere on the show, about what, where their future lies. Ali, can I ask you, just to conclude with both of you, start with you, Ali, about just what it feels like. You are young, and, for those who are maybe thinking about, they hear this and they see your success and think, yeah, maybe I'm going to give it a shot and go into politics and run for office somewhere. I don't know, just what it feels like. And did you both go to the orientation? Just a few reflections on, what's it been like to step into the spotlight, and now you're elected and now you're really there.
I won't sugarcoat it. Politics is a blood sport. And it is something that you have to be so passionate about what you're saying and believe it so wholeheartedly that it's not forced, because the voters and the everyday people will read right through it. And my best piece of advice to anybody that wants to throw their hat in the ring is do it. And I'm not guaranteeing that you're going to win, but I have learned more throughout my 30 years from my failures than I have from my successes. And I think that is very easy in today's day and age to just see people like David and I, and that's when the glory happens. What they don't see is the hours upon hours of work that goes into putting on a successful campaign like we have. And this is just the easy part, right? Then you get elected, and you have to have this heart for service, and you have to understand that you're not going to win, and you're probably very used to being the smartest, the best, the fastest, whatever it is, in whatever you've done in the past. And now you're in a room full of people that have been in that same situation. So it's strategy, it's people skills, it's passion, it's knowledge. And, Steve, you asked me about something as far as a message of hope, and this is the message of hope that I'm going to send to the rest of California. The Central Valley, that is a very traditional, very conservative part of California, put its trust in a 30-year-old young woman because I said the message that got to them, right? California wants to feel heard and
Yes.
represented. And we're seeing that when David and I were at orientation of, there's 5 of us new members there. We're still waiting on Leticia to come and join us, so we're holding on to hope for that. But the buzzword of the couple of days we were there was, I'm a moderate Democrat. What exactly does that mean? That is going to be what David and I are going to be seeking within the very near future of people that say they want to work with us. And David and I cannot wait to work with them because the issues that we're facing are just California issues. But what that looks like is going to be very interesting, and the dynamics of how Gavin Newsom tries to make sure that his power is known with Trump in the White House is going to be something that we all have to navigate. But once again, something that people like Carl have done really well is he understands that, we're not going to have the numbers in Sacramento, but we do in the community, and people like you, Steve, people like Carl that have access to those people empower us the same way they got SB 14 passed. It was the public saying, we will not stand for that. This does not represent us. And if you want to be a successful candidate, listen to people want, take a note from Kamala Harris, and don't do all of the things that she did, which were tone deafening. Do what Trump did, and he learned from what he did wrong in the past, which was a loss, and he came back with a giant win and said, it's about the people. This is what the people want. That's what I'm going to give them.
I love it. David, last word.
Yeah, but I think you're right on that. I am the first Polynesian elected to the state legislature, and it's an honor of mine to do so because of the disconnect that opposite side. But I think people should be aware of how much work. I'm actually sitting next to my campaign manager right now because I was on the radio right before this because I needed to put new tires on my truck because I put over 64,000 miles in this campaign, because the people are worth it. And so if anybody's thinking about trying to get in on this fight, you have to put in the work because it's worth it. You have to know why you are running, not just to run for a seat. And if you want a position of leadership, you just can't get the roles. You need the duties as well. And that's the part where you look at Allie and what she's working on and what she's fighting for. Her family's in ag. I grew up in a very low and impoverished community, and I felt disconnected from the leadership here in California and just look at what Kamala Harris was doing. She was bringing out all these celebrities and everybody else to tell us what to do. I could tell you this, the last time that celebrity probably bought groceries was before they were a celebrity. The last time that they cared about the carbon emission or didn't care about the carbon emissions in the air was when they didn't have an airplane that was driving and flying them everywhere that they needed to do. Or even filling up on gas. Probably never filled up in the gas pump within the last 10 years. But I have. My father passed away earlier this year, and now I take care of my family. And I got an extra mortgage and groceries and a younger brother who's 17 years old. So I take care of them, and I know it is those people that I want to serve. This is a position of service where people have really held it as they believe that it's an elevated status for them. It is not. It is the greatest honor to serve the people. I think we want to be the definition of what it means to be public servants again. So that way we can take care of our families and we can really look forward to the future of just being here in California because it is worth fighting for. So we want everybody to be a part of this as well. Let's do this together. This isn't an I thing. It's not something that we can do alone. We need people to stop being California complacent and really start being California conservatives again. And let's fight for this home.
Beautiful. I love it. And I just want to finish by saying you both work very hard. You both jumped on this at very short notice. I just felt I wanted to have a bit of your winner's energy in this show, and I really appreciate you doing that, both of you, today. And we'll see you very soon, and really look forward to everything you're going to be doing for us in Sacramento. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. That is our fun-packed show for today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure you follow us and tell your friends all about the show. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Next week is Thanksgiving, so I'm going to be off. So we will see you back here soon for the next episode of The Steve Hilton Show.